بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. In today's lecture, I will share some reflections over some of the verses that come in Surah An-Nisa. Surah An-Nisa is a very important surah that we familiarize ourselves with. We should become familiar with this surah, at least read the translation and the tafsir of this surah, because Surah An-Nisa teaches us a lot about family life and family structure. So there are many laws pertaining to the husband and the wife, pertaining to laws of inheritance, laws of marriage. Allah Ta'ala gives us laws regarding the family structure. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions mahrams, who it is permissible to marry and who it is impermissible to marry. And so this is a very important surah for all of us who are married or are looking to get married, for us to read. And even if one is not married, it is important for them to read the surah so that they learn the laws of inheritance. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the very beginning of the surah, introduces or speaks about the importance of different aspects of marriage. So from the very first ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to marriage. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to fear Him. Ya ayyuhan nasu ttaqu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahida. O mankind, fear your Lord, who has created you from one soul, wa khalaqa minha zawjaha, and from that one soul He has created its partner. Now, this is a very, and the ayah continues, but this ayah is one of the three ayat that it is sunnah to recite at marriage. And I'm sure many of you have heard this ayah before, the first ayah of Surah An-Nisa. And it is important to realize that in this ayah, and also the other two ayahs that are recited at marriage, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha haqqa tuqatihi, and also Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. In all three of these ayat that it is sunnah to recite when a person is getting married in the khutbah of the nikah, the word taqwa comes. The word taqwa comes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nasu taqu rabbakum, in this verse. In the other verse, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu taqullah. And in the third verse, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu taqullah again. Why is taqwa so important when it comes to marriage? The reason why taqwa is so important is because what is taqwa? Taqwa is to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is to have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you. If a person understands that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching him or her, then they will think twice and three times and four times before they infringe upon the right of their spouse. Right? When you do something for your spouse, or when you refrain from getting upset at your spouse because of something that they have done to you that it may have been wrong, but when you refrain from getting upset for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you and it was a mistake, then that is exactly what taqwa is, to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't ever want to do anything in your life without having the consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it is that time, it is in those moments that people make grave mistakes. So if we have this notion in our minds that we are all human beings and everyone makes mistakes, and we are conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only will we fulfill the rights of others, and in particular in marriage, because I'm speaking about marriage as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens this surah with some verses regarding marriage. Regardless if your spouse is fulfilling your rights or not, you will fulfill their rights knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you. And by fulfilling someone's rights, it is natural that that person will want to also fulfill your rights. Right? So it should not be something that, oh, my wife is not fulfilling my rights, or a woman thinks that my husband is not fulfilling my rights, I'm just going to not do anything. No, rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us the importance of having taqwa in these matters, because when you fulfill someone's rights, they will fulfill your rights. Also to forgive in this manner as well, as we will look at later on in the tafsir as well. In 28th juz, a very important principle of marriage comes in that juz. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a couple of ayat later, mentions the importance of giving mahar. وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ النِّحْلَةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding men to give their wives their mahar. It is necessary, it is wajib for a man to give a woman mahar when he is getting married. This is something that is clearly, explicitly mentioned to us in the Quran, and we learn this through the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, in many cultures, unfortunately, it is common for men to give ridiculous mahars that they know they will never give, and nor do they have any intention to give it. So you hear stories of people who say that I'm going to give $1,000,000 in mahar or a couple of $100,000 in mahar, but they will never give that mahar. Maybe they will, maybe they're very rich and they will give that mahar, but most of the time when a person gives or mentions a very large mahar, they do not have the intention of giving it. At the same time, unfortunately, in many communities or in many cultures, giving a woman her mahar is synonymous to divorcing her. So, unfortunately, this happens where you will see cases where a woman will receive her mahar and she will be scared. That is my husband thinking about divorcing me because he has given me my mahar. This goes completely against Islamic teachings and the spirit of Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that when a man marries a woman, he must give her a mahar. Whether it was not specified beforehand or not, that's different. However, the mahar has to be given. And on top of that, the husband has no right to demand the wife to forego her mahar or to give any mahar back to him. So for example, if the husband has stipulated, if he mentioned that I will give my wife $5,000 for mahar, he cannot force her to give back that 5,000 or anything less. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, فَإِن طِبْنَ لَكُمْ عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِّنْهُ نَفْسًا, that if she gives it from her own end, from her own heart, if she decides to forego her mahar, or either entirely or just a small amount, then فَكُلُوهُ هَنِيئًا مَرِيًّا, then you can take it, then you can eat it, meaning you can take it back, no problem. However, a man does not have any right to force his wife to give back the mahar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, moving on further in the surah, mentions some important points regarding inheritance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُوصِيكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي أَوْلَادِكُمْ لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ. Now these verses, this set of verses is speaking about inheritance and the importance of inheritance, and it behooves us all as Muslims to understand the laws of inheritance, to learn them, and to make sure that we write our wills in accordance to the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has detailed for us who receives what portion, so which inheritor receives how much money. And it is important to realize a very important principle here, that before Islam, meaning during Jahiliyyah, it was very common, or rather before Jahiliyyah, what was a common thing was that women, they did not receive any mahar, and let alone receiving any mahar, they themselves were inherited. So for example, when a husband passed away, his wife would be inherited by his inheritors, right? So she was treated as a piece of property. Just like your money is inherited by your inheritors, likewise, a woman was inherited by her inheritors before Islam. And so when Islam came, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made clear that, first of all, women are not inherited, right? That's clear. But on top of that, they receive an inheritance. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ, that the man receives twice the reward, twice the inheritance of a woman. Why? This is a question that when a person reads the tafsir of the Quran, they will sometimes question this, that why is it that a woman receives less inheritance than a man? And if you, I apologize, but if you just give me 2 seconds, I need to plug in my the charger before my computer dies. So a woman, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, receives half of the inheritance of a man. And why is that? The reason why, and I want to clarify this point because it is an important point, and this thought lingers on the minds of many individuals. So does Islam seem unfair to women, for example? No, absolutely not. The reason why this is the case is because a man's responsibility is, in terms of financial responsibility, is much greater than a woman's responsibility. A man has to take care of his wife. A man has to take care of his parents. A wife has to take care of his. Sorry, I think I was saying wife the whole time. But a man has to take care of his wife. A man has to take care of his parents. A man has to take care of his children. A man has to take care of other family members, for example, siblings who are not able to take care of themselves. This is the man's responsibility. Whereas a woman's responsibility in terms of financial responsibilities, they're literally zero. She doesn't have any responsibilities over in order to provide for her children. It is her husband's responsibility. She does not have responsibility to provide for her parents. If she does these things out of her own will, out of her own good, then of course that is she will be rewarded for that. But they are not responsibilities upon her. Therefore, when the parents die, for example, a son will receive twice the inheritance of the woman because his responsibilities are greater, right? He has more financial responsibilities. Whereas, as I mentioned, the wife does not have many financial responsibilities, if any. And she can keep that money to herself. She does not have to give that to anyone. She does not have to give that to her children. She does not have to give that to her husband. She can spend it on whatever she wants to spend it on. So this is why Islam is a very fair religion, of course, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mandates that a woman receives inheritance, just like a man receives inheritance. However, the amount is slightly different because the financial responsibilities are different between the two. Now, an interesting point to mention is that at the time that this was revealed, right, you can imagine that the people were very shocked by this, that they were shocked for the opposite reason, right? Nowadays, people are shocked that why does a woman receive less than a man? If they don't have the proper understanding, if they're not explained to it properly, they will be confused regarding this. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at that time, at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, people were shocked because women were receiving any inheritance, right? They were shocked that why should a woman even receive any inheritance? And nowadays, because of a misunderstanding that many Muslims have, they look at it that women are receiving too less inheritance, right? So it's a matter of perspective. And subhanAllah, this is why Islam is so beautiful, that when we learn the ahkam of Islam, whatever doubts that a person may have, all of those doubts will be cleared because they will realize how perfect Islam and its laws truly are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, there are so many verses that I would like to share some thoughts on. But if we go forward to ayah number 19, this is a very important verse. Due to the current situation that we are in the lockdown situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, la yuhillu lakum an tarithu nisaa karha. O you who believe, it is not permissible for you to inherit your women forcefully. And this was what I was speaking about earlier, that women were inherited against their own will. And this is not a condition that if a woman is not inherited forcefully, meaning if she wants to be inherited, then she can be inherited. No, this is not this is not why Qur'an or forcefully is mentioned here, but it is a description of how women were inherited, that they were inherited against their own will. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making it clear that that is impermissible. And Allah Ta'ala is making it clear once again that it is impermissible to keep a woman against your own will or against her own will with the intention to divorce her, but and waiting to divorce her so that she will give you some money back. So you're basically threatening her that you must give me a certain amount of money and then I will divorce you, right? If you already have the intention, right? It is separate, and I don't want to get into the laws of divorce too much because they are complex. But there's a difference between khula and just simple divorce, right? Where a man intends to divorce his wife, and so he divorces his wife. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about that scenario, that if you intend to divorce your wife, then divorce her. Don't take any money from her or threaten her or keep her against her own will with the condition that you must pay me and then I will divorce you. That is separate from khul'a, as I mentioned. Khul'a is where the man has no intention to divorce his wife. He doesn't want to divorce his wife. So the woman says, why don't you divorce me and I will give you my mahar back, for example, or I will give you, half of my mahar back in order for you to divorce me, right? These are two separate scenarios. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making it clear here, as I mentioned at the beginning of the surah, he did as well, that it is not proper for a man to take back the wife's mahar against her will. Moving on, right after this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. And this is the point that I want to make very clear here. That Allah ta'ala says, and live with them, treat them properly, with good character, بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Treat your wives with good character. Why? فَإِن كَرِهْتُمُوهُنَّ فَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا وَيَجْعَلَ اللَّهُ فِيهِ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. If you dislike them, if you do not like them, فَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا, perhaps you may dislike something, but Allah Ta'ala has put khayr in there. وَيَجْعَلَ اللَّهُ فِيهِ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. So it may happen, and of course the opposite applies as well, that sometimes a woman may not really be completely satisfied or happy with her husband. Likewise, the husband may not be completely happy or satisfied with his wife. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us in the surah, in this verse, that it may be the case that you may not like something, but Allah ta'ala has actually put khayr in there. You may not see the khayr, you may not notice the khayr right away, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning that there may be khayr in there. And the reason why I want to mention this, and I want to end with this point, is because during the lockdown situation, when most of us are at home, of course, all of us in Illinois and most of us throughout the country, we are at home, we are around our spouses much more often than we would regularly be. So if the man is working outside of the home, usually he is only inside of the home for a set number of hours every day. Yet, because of the lockdown, all of the family members are together and they see each other all the time. So it is very common, or it may happen, it may be the case that you may dislike something, or something may be getting on your nerves regarding your spouse, or regarding your family, regarding your children. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us in this verse to have patience, that you should treat your wives, your women folk, with good character. And if you dislike something, then perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually put khayr in that. Likewise, it is important for the women to understand this as well, that the husbands are at home most of the time nowadays. The husbands are at home, and so they may get annoyed or upset, or they may not like something that the husband is doing. Yet it is important to have patience and live by this rule that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set forth, that we must treat each other with good character and good conduct. Now, this is, these verses, these were actually only verses from the fourth juz, because Surah An-Nisa actually begins in the latter part of the fourth juz, in the last quarter of the fourth juz. So we didn't even get to speak about most of the verses from the fifth juz that I would like to speak about. But I just want to show you and introduce you to some of the main characteristics, some of the main beautiful points that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making clear for us in Surah An-Nisa regarding family structure, regarding inheritance, regarding laws of marriage and divorce. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the correct understanding. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us love and peace and harmony within our homes, and makes our homes of happiness. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connects or increases our connection with the Quran. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.